A deafening explosion rocked the cabin, shaking the ground beneath Liam's feet. The world seemed to collapse in on itself as wood splintered and flames erupted. Time slowed for a moment, the roar of the blast filling his ears, his mind unable to process the chaos unfolding. He had only seconds to react. "Maria, get down!" Liam shouted, his voice drowned out by the blast as he tackled her to the floor. The cabin was coming apart around them, the heat from the fire scorching the air. Debris fell like rain, crashing to the ground in a twisted mess of broken beams and shattered glass. They scrambled for cover as the flames licked closer, but amidst the chaos, one thought tore through Liam's mind. Evelyn. Through the haze of dust and fire, he saw her, a figure slumped over in the chair where she'd been tied. She wasn't moving. Jack, however, was nowhere to be seen. Liam's heart raced as he bolted toward Evelyn, ignoring the searing heat. His hands worked quickly, pulling her limp form from the chair, untying the ropes that had bound her. The explosion had knocked her unconscious, but she was still breathing, barely. "Evelyn, stay with me," he murmured as he hoisted her into his arms. He glanced around, but Jack had vanished into the smoke and flames, disappearing into the wreckage like a ghost. Maria, coughing from the smoke, stumbled over to them, helping Liam guide Evelyn out of the burning cabin. The heat grew unbearable as they fought their way through the collapsing structure, each step feeling heavier than the last. Just as they reached the door, the cabin groaned loudly, and a section of the ceiling came crashing down behind them. They barely made it outside before the entire cabin collapsed into a smoldering heap of rubble. The night air was cool compared to the inferno behind them, but the weight of what had just happened left Liam cold. He laid Evelyn down on the grass, her face pale, streaked with ash and blood, but she was alive. That was all that mattered. "We need an ambulance," Maria yelled into her radio, her voice hoarse from the smoke. Liam knelt beside Evelyn, checking her pulse. It was weak but steady. She would make it, but only just. He took a deep breath, trying to calm his pounding heart, but his mind was spinning. Jack was gone, the cabin was destroyed, and yet the mystery still felt unsolved. There was something more, something they hadn't seen yet. The ambulance arrived within minutes, taking Evelyn to the hospital for treatment. As Liam and Maria watched her leave, a dark realization settled over them. Jack had vanished, but he wasn't dead. The explosion hadn't been a desperate final act. It had been a distraction. Jack had planned this. He knew exactly what he was doing. "He's still out there," Maria said, her voice shaking with anger and exhaustion. "He's not finished." Liam nodded, his jaw clenched. "We have to find him before he finishes what he started." Hours later, back at the station, Liam and Maria pored over everything they had on Jack Stone. His history, his financials, any possible connection that could lead them to where he might be hiding. But Jack had been careful. Every trace they found led to a dead end. Frustration boiled in Liam's chest. Jack was slipping away, and they still didn't fully understand why. Why had he orchestrated all of this? What had driven him to abduct his own sister, to fake his concern, to pull the strings in this twisted plot? The answers were close but elusive, like shadows in the fog. As Maria sifted through more paperwork, she paused, her brow furrowing. "Liam, look at this," she said, handing him a document. It was an old file buried in the records from over 10 years ago, a lawsuit. David Harlow had sued Jack Stone's real estate company for fraud and embezzlement. The lawsuit had been settled out of court, but the records revealed the ugly truth. Jack had been siphoning money from the company for years, and David had uncovered it. "This is it," Maria said. David found out about Jack's dirty dealings. That's why Jack hated him. It wasn't just bad blood, it was blackmail. Liam's mind raced. It all started to make sense. Jack had been living a lie, hiding his crimes, and when David discovered the truth, Jack had no choice but to silence him. But where did Evelyn fit into all of this? Then, like a key turning in a lock, the final piece of the puzzle clicked into place. Evelyn knew, Liam whispered, his eyes wide with realization. She found out what Jack had done too. That's why he had to keep her under control. She was going to expose him. Maria's eyes widened. So he staged the whole thing, her disappearance, the fake concern, just to make sure she couldn't talk. Liam nodded grimly. Jack couldn't let her leave, not after everything she knew. But there was still one thing that didn't sit right. David was missing. Jack had been the orchestrator, but David was still a loose end. They needed to find him, and they needed to find him fast. The next morning, they got the break they were looking for. A tip came in. A witness had seen a man matching David Harlow's description at an abandoned warehouse on the outskirts of town. Liam and Maria wasted no time, heading straight for the location, their nerves on edge. The warehouse was old and crumbling, the perfect place to hide someone away from the world. They entered cautiously, the building creaking ominously in the wind. Inside it was dark, cold, and smelled of decay. Their footsteps echoed off the concrete floors as they moved deeper into the building. Liam's heart raced as they approached a locked door at the back. With a quick glance at Maria, he kicked it open. Inside, tied to a chair in the center of the room, was David Harlow. He was alive, barely. Liam rushed to his side, cutting the ropes that bound him. David was weak, his face bruised and gaunt, but he managed to whisper 2 words that sent a chill down Liam's spine. "He's coming." Liam's eyes darted around the room. "Jack?" David nodded weakly, his breathing labored. He wanted me gone, but he's not done. Evelyn, he's going after her." Liam's blood ran cold. Jack had used the explosion to cover his tracks, to make them believe he was gone, but his endgame was still in motion, and Evelyn was still in danger. "We need to move," Liam said urgently, pulling David to his feet. "Maria, call the hospital. Jack's going to finish what he started." Back at the hospital, the air was thick with tension. Evelyn was recovering in a secure room, guarded by police, but Liam knew it wasn't enough. Jack had slipped through their fingers once, and he wouldn't stop until he got what he wanted. As they arrived at the hospital, Liam's heart pounded in his chest. Every instinct screamed that Jack was already here, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. They moved quickly through the halls, reaching Evelyn's room just in time to see a shadowy figure disappearing around the corner. "Jack!" Liam shouted, sprinting after him. The chase through the hospital was a blur. Jack moved with the desperation of a man who had nothing left to lose. He darted through hallways and stairwells, trying to outrun Liam and Maria, but they were closing in. Finally, Jack burst onto the rooftop, the cold night air whipping around them. He stood at the edge, breathing heavily, his eyes wild with anger and fear. "Stay back," Jack shouted, holding something in his hand. Liam squinted, recognizing it immediately, a syringe. Liam and Maria stopped in their tracks, their guns raised, but Jack didn't flinch. "You don't understand," Jack hissed, his voice trembling. "She was going to ruin everything. I had to do it. I had to protect her." "Jack, it's over," Liam said, his voice steady but firm. "Evelyn's safe. You don't have to run anymore." But Jack's eyes were distant, filled with a twisted sense of justification. "You think this is about money? About David? It's bigger than that. I couldn't let her go. I couldn't lose her." "Jack, this isn't love," Maria said softly. "It's control. Let her go." Jack's hand trembled as he held the syringe up to his neck, his eyes locking with Liam's. "I won't let her leave me." Before Liam or Maria could react, Jack plunged the syringe into his neck, his body stiffening as the contents took effect. He stumbled backward, collapsing to the ground as his eyes rolled back. Liam rushed to his side, but it was too late. "Jack Stone," The man who had orchestrated this entire twisted plot lay lifeless on the cold rooftop. It was over. The next day, Evelyn awoke in her hospital bed, weak but alive. Liam sat by her side, relieved to see her safe. "Jack's gone," he told her gently. "You're safe now." Evelyn closed her eyes, tears streaming down her face. "He never let me live my own life," she whispered. "He wanted to control everything." Liam nodded, understanding the weight of her words. The twisted web, Liam nodded, understanding the weight of her words. The twisted web of control and manipulation that Jack had spun had finally come to an end, but its impact on Evelyn would last forever. She had been living in the shadow of her brother's obsession for so long, her life dictated by his need for power. Now she was free, but that freedom came with a heavy price. Evelyn took a deep breath, her voice trembling. "I didn't know how far he would go. I just wanted to leave, to be free of him. But when I found out about the money, the fraud, I became another thing he needed to control." Liam sat quietly, letting her speak, his heart heavy with sympathy. Evelyn had been a pawn in Jack's game, caught between his paranoia and desperation. "He told me he was protecting me," she continued, her voice thick with emotion. "But I knew it wasn't protection, it was fear. Fear of losing everything, of being exposed. And when David tried to help me, Jack turned on him too." Liam nodded, finally piecing together the last fragments of the mystery. Jack had been terrified of losing control, of his money, his reputation, and, most of all, his sister. When David discovered the truth about the fraud and tried to help Evelyn escape Jack's grip, it pushed Jack over the edge. His obsession had spiraled into something dark and violent, leading him to abduct Evelyn and stage the twisted game that had nearly cost her life. But now, it was over. A few days later, Liam and Maria stood outside the hospital, watching the sun rise over the horizon. The case was finally closed, the nightmare behind them, but the weight of it still lingered. "You did good, Liam," Maria said, offering him a small smile. "We saved her." Liam nodded, but his gaze was distant. "Yeah, but at what cost? Jack's dead, David's in critical condition, and Evelyn, she's going to be living with this for the rest of her life." Maria sighed. "Some wounds take time to heal, but at least she's alive. She can start over." Liam thought about that, letting the idea settle in his mind. Evelyn had a chance to rebuild her life, free from the twisted control Jack had imposed on her. She could finally live on her own terms, without fear or manipulation. It wasn't a perfect ending, but it was something. As they stood in silence, Liam's phone buzzed. He glanced at the screen, an email from the department, closing the file on Jack Stone. It was officially over. With a deep breath, Liam turned to Maria. "Let's get out of here." Maria nodded, and together they walked away from the hospital, the sun rising higher in the sky, casting a warm glow on the world around them. The twisted, dark mystery had finally untangled, leaving behind the promise of a new day, one filled with hope, healing, and the chance to begin again.